Today's Bible reading is taken from Luke 9, verses 43 to 50. While everyone was marveling at all that Jesus did, he said to his disciples, "Listen carefully to what I am about to tell you. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men." But they did not understand what this meant. It was hidden from them, so that they did not grasp it, and they were afraid to ask him about it. An argument started among the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, took a little child and made him stand beside him. Then he said to them, "Whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For it is the one who is least among you all who is the greatest." "Master," said John, "we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him, because he is not one of us." "Do not stop him," Jesus said, "for whoever is not against you is for you." This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Angela. Let's pray. Lord, we pray that by your word, you would bring us yourself, bring us transformation, and draw us closer to you. Lord, reveal to us through your written word, your living word, Jesus. Amen. So for those who don't know me, my name's James, and I'm married to an influencer. Growing up, I wasn't aware of the term influencer, but for those who have missed it, in its modern sense, it's used to refer to individuals who have a significant social media following, who can sway things like opinions, purchasing decisions, or more gently, encourage people to engage with things through the content that they create. Now, this term gained prominence through the 2000s and 2010, particularly with the rise of platforms like YouTube and Instagram. But there have always been influences throughout history. For example, the Queen, the band Queen, the royal families in general, Aristotle, Bob Marley, Jesus, to mention just a few. Now, my wife actually prefers the term content creator. She doesn't like the term influencer, and actually I don't really like the term influencer either. She creates things online, like videos and images, so people can use them and inspired by them. And this is her thing, Leicester and Beyond family. I'm married with a 9, a 5, and a 2-year-old. It's actually quite a difficult season for me because it's birthday season, August, September, October. So my kids' ages keep on changing, which is really annoying because I have to remember how old they are. But my wife set up this Instagram account as firstly a creative outlet, but also a way to enable families to engage with what's going on in Leicester, to enjoy time together as a family. We love going out on day trips and exploring places in and around Leicester together. We had a great day at Belvoir Castle yesterday, even though it's spelled Belvoir. I mean, someone who's from Leicestershire, please explain that to me later. My wife is really good at researching things and knowing what's good around and sharing that with others. And she now has a fairly decent number of followers on Instagram. But that's not what makes it successful. I think it's successful because it is doing what it set out to do, which is to share things for people to do as families, with friends, to have quality time out and about. And one of the things I really like about my wife's Instagram is that it's not really a look at me, look at us, but it's more of a look at what you could do. This is available. And Charlotte by no means presents us as a perfect family, which would certainly be a lie. We are not. However, social media is so often a self-promotion thing, a status thing, you might say a greatness thing. We live in a world which is rife with self-promotion, and it's so ugly. Look at my achievements. Look at my car. Look at my wealth. Look at me, me, me. Am I not so great? Great at cooking, sport, fitness, parenting, leadership, management, art, making money, looking beautiful, making music. I could, of course, go on. Aren't I so great? The culture says. Oh, and if that thing that I did didn't work out well, that was someone else's fault. Now, we've been traveling across the summer looking at Luke's gospel. And today we've arrived at Luke chapter 9. It'd be helpful if you had sight of it in front of you. This is actually our last week looking at Luke's gospel before we move on to our autumn preaching series. We're in Luke 9, verse 43. And initially, this short passage from Luke's gospel has three seemingly unrelated little distinct stories. The first one, Jesus predicts his death, not for the first time in Luke's gospel. The second one, an argument about who is the greatest disciple. And then thirdly, a report about someone else who's not one of these disciples driving out demons. And I think as I've been looking at these verses, I see them all linked by the theme of greatness. Now, I've lived in Leicester for just over 4 years, probably last week. And I used to live in Sheffield on the edge of a really big park, an amazing park called Graves Park, which was an absolute blessing in the pandemic. And on the edge of Graves Park is this church. And the first time I ever saw the logo for the church, I was slightly surprised. My first reaction was, how arrogant! St. James, the great church. And then I realized there's an issue here with the wording and the presentation of it. Now, in the New Testament, there are several people called James, which I've said before, but there are actually two disciples called James, and they're distinguished by one of them being the elder or the taller, often called great, and then the other one, unfortunately, called the lesser or smaller or younger. But if you don't know this, you basically go up to this church, and there, before you go in, it says, St. James, the great church. The church has seemingly always been susceptible about thinking about greatness. In Luke 9:46, in our reading, we have this argument amongst the disciples of Jesus about who is the greatest. We have in our Bibles 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We're looking and focusing on Luke's account of this story today, but in Mark, he also describes this story and his account of this conversation amongst the disciples. Mark writes that Jesus was asking the disciples what they were talking about on the way, on the road. And they fall silent as they've been talking about who is the greatest. They know this isn't something they should be talking about, even thinking about. And can you imagine that moment where Jesus says, hey guys, what were you talking about on the road? And they're like, my new sandals? The weather? But Jesus knows they were talking about who is the greatest. You see, Jesus calls us away from status and power. Just look at the way he lived his life. And indeed, how he died his death and his birth. Jesus was born in relative poverty, became a refugee at a young age. Jesus spoke out against the rich and the powerful. He spoke about going the extra mile for people when asked, even enemies, turning the other cheek when someone struck you. Jesus did not cling to position, even though people at times wanted to make him king. Jesus hung out with the rejected, the outcasts of society, the tax collectors, the poor, the ill, the unclean in his time and culture. And we read in our passage that Jesus knew the thoughts of the disciples. He knew they were thinking and talking about greatness. I wonder how much we think and talk about greatness. And what does Jesus do in response to this? Well, he brings a child, it says in Luke's gospel. Luke says a little child. In Mark's gospel, in his equivalent, he actually says that the child could go in Jesus' arms. There's a little child standing next to Jesus, perhaps a toddler or even younger. Now, in Jesus' time, children would have very little status, barely seen and not heard. In Judaism, Jesus' culture and place, they treated children better than surrounding cultures, certainly. But even then, it was considered a waste of time to teach someone under 12 the scriptures. I'm so happy that we invest and value our children in church today. They are not just the church of tomorrow, they are the church today. Jesus does not see children as insignificant. So to respond to who is the greatest, Jesus brings this little child into their midst. Why? To make them think and to make a point. And I think to make us think and to make a point. What has this little child achieved? What have they done? What have they succeeded in? What empire have they built for themselves? What finances have they accumulated? How have they given to society? How have they taught? How have they influenced others? Maybe they have not achieved very much. But what Jesus is doing, I think, in this is saying that they are still great in God's eyes. Because everyone is important in God's eyes. Humanity, all of us, humans, are made in God's image. And we deserve respect on that basis alone. That fact that humanity is made in God's image has been such a significant thing over the years in terms of Christians and matters of justice and social matters. Everyone is important, Jesus is saying. Greatness in some way comes just from being a human. We're considered in God's creation as very good. A created one, loved by God. Not some kind of random accident. All people are great. They have dignity. All are reachable and loved by God and can be in relationship with God. In some ways, greatness is our status as just a human. Greatness is not about the bank account, the job title, the letters after or before our name, the number of social media followers, the size of our house. Welcoming a child is like welcoming Jesus himself. Verse 48, Jesus says, this child, who seemingly in the eyes of the disciples carries very little status, is important to God. Indeed, if you welcome a child, Jesus says, you welcome Jesus. I love how Jesus doesn't respond to questions often with straight answers in the Gospels, which can sometimes be frustrating for us, I'm sure. But here in our passage, he responds to this talk about greatness in a really thought-provoking way. His response is almost, don't look for status, but instead make yourself low. That's the kind of response he gives. Greatness is found in attitude, in humility. Spiritually, the opposite to status and power is humility and lack of concern about where you are on the ladder, the pecking order. And I think this is such a challenge for us today, for me and for all of us. Where are we striving for power or status or recognition? How are we How are we chasing after this? What areas do we think we are great in? I think Jesus is so concerned with what's going on in our hearts. That's not to say that we can't try and achieve and do well in things, of course. But Jesus is concerned about our hearts and is in the business of heart transformation. So what statuses, what titles, positions, may we just need to lay down before God and say, this is yours? And what pride, perhaps, in achievement might we just need to let go of? As I mentioned, I've got 3 young kids, and I've been in a seemingly long season of animal identification. So this isn't a whole game that's going to take up the whole rest of a 7. But what's this? It's a goat. It's a goat. Does anyone know what GOAT is an acronym for? Very good. Greatest of all time. Again, something I wasn't aware of growing up, but it's come more in recent years. I think the first time I heard this in conversation, I was deeply confused. It's like, yeah, they're definitely the GOAT. I'm like, what are you talking about? But greatest of all time, GOAT. Often used in sports, is it Cristiano Ronaldo or is it Lionel Messi? In tennis, is it Serena Williams or maybe Steffi Graf or Martina Navratilova? The thing about greatness, though, and being the GOAT, is that it is competitive. It's about being better than someone else. It sometimes involves pushing down others or literally beating them or defeating them. It's elevating yourself. So I wonder again, what status might we need to lay down before God? What pride and achievement might we just need to let go of? Do we see ourselves as great and others as not? Because actually, as I said, our real value is being in who we are before God, made in the image of God. And if you're a Christian in this place today, son or daughter of the loving Father. Returning to the passage again, it seems here that Jesus is calling us away from status and power, and again through his life, his teaching, and through his death. Jesus' greatness can be summarized in what looks like a lack of greatness, in his death on the cross, where this passage starts. Because we have the irony of the fact that in the middle of this passage, the disciples are talking about who is the greatest, when Jesus has just been talking about his rejection and crucifixion, that he will die. There's such great irony here. It's really weird when you just read it. It's like Jesus is like, well, I'm going to die. And they're like, but who is the greatest amongst us? It's like, what? Did you miss what I just said? Indeed, our passage starts in Luke 9:43 with people marveling at Jesus for what he was doing. Essentially, look how great he is. But then Jesus turns to his disciples and basically says, it won't always be like this. I won't always be looked upon as great. In fact, I'm going to be put on a cross, rejected and scorned. That doesn't look great. Things are going to change. Indeed, in verse 44, he tells them to listen carefully. And they need to listen carefully because this is going to be hard to understand. And they don't get it, we see. How can the promised one, the Messiah, Jesus has just been established as the Messiah in Luke's gospel, how can this chosen one, this one promised, come to accomplish God's will and be rejected? Isn't this supposed to be some kind of glorious, great victory? There's a misunderstanding of greatness and what it looks like. So they need to listen carefully. I mean, Jesus told them some 20 verses earlier, not that long in Luke's gospel, about his rejection and death, but they still don't quite get it. In fact, just before our reading starts, literally Luke's gospel says, and they were all amazed at the greatness of God. Jesus is really saying, yes, what I'm doing may look great, but I'm going to redefine what greatness really is. You know what is great, Jesus says? Loving others so much that you lower yourself before them. That is greatness. Sacrificing yourself for others. That is greatness. Laying your life down, metaphorically or literally, for others. That is greatness. Dying on a cross for others. That is greatness. Jesus is so great that he redefines what we see as greatness. Because Jesus is the perfect human, the greatest human, not just human, he's God incarnate. Jesus is God with us, the incarnation. But Jesus defines and should redefine for us what greatness looks like and what it is. Greatness is not status and power and what the world around thinks. Greatness is a small child in our midst. Greatness is that everyone is important and valuable. Greatness is that we as humans are loved by a creator. Greatness is that someone would lower themselves for the sake of others. Greatness is victory over death, through death. Greatness is a man nailed to a cross, a degrading death so that others may live. In my teenage years, I remember visiting some kind of museum or something with my family. And I can't remember the name of this person or even the place I was, but I remember reading a story about a guy who I think was in the World War II, and he was in his fellow soldiers in an area under attack. And there was a grenade thrown into their rather enclosed area. And what this guy did was he leapt on top of it to take the blow and to shield and save his fellow soldiers, which he did. I remember being struck by this. Wow. But for us, greatness might not be this literal laying down of our life in this way. Greatness can be quietly getting along with the task of work in whatever job setting that has been given you, voluntary or paid. Greatness can just be simply raising children or looking after that elderly parent. I think Jesus asked us to redefine what we see as greatness in this passage and to refocus on him. Now, a few weeks ago, yesterday I went to Belvoir Castle. A few weeks ago, I went to a fun place called Twin Lakes, which is near Melton Mowbray. Some of the young people went there recently on a weekend away. And it's great. It's kind of like a theme park, but for kids. There's lots of different rides. There's some animals and stuff. But as we were walking from one place to another, we came across this guy doing a little kind of magic, kind of circus kind of thing. It's more of a circus kind of thing. And we were quite intrigued, so we sat down. And anyway, partway through this show, this guy said, so I'm going to do some juggling things. Like I'd love someone to volunteer, a parent, to help catch things. And then my son, my 9-year-old son, hand went kudung up in the air. And then I was called up. I had a lovely time with this guy. He was a very nice guy. We had a little bit of a banter about juggling. I actually learned to juggle at university. That wasn't my course. That was mathematics. But it was great fun. The trick culminated in him throwing balls and me catching them in his hat. But at one point, he asked me what I did when he realized that I could do maths and also juggle. I think he was intrigued. I was like, I'm a vicar. And then he said, are you a very reverend or a reverend? And I said, just call me James. I'm glad that no one really calls me reverend. I don't really like that title. I mean, sometimes titles can be helpful, sometimes not. But I wonder if there are various things that we hold over ourselves in that way, those titles. We don't need to boast or elevate ourselves. We don't need to chase elevation. We live in God's kingdom as Christians. And if he wants to raise you up, then he will raise you up. I wonder what language this looks like for us. What does this look like for us in how we share about ourselves? I'm sure many of us are familiar with the story of Joseph from Genesis. A number of Josephs again in the Bible, but the one in Genesis, the guy with the, Technicolor coat and all the songs and whatnot. It's fascinating, his story, because he starts off having these dreams and he tells his brother, I'm going to be great. People are going to bow down. I mean, hey, I had a dream. Why are you going to tell your brothers that? Sounds great idea. They obviously weren't so happy. If you don't know the story, he ends up being sold into slavery, has some dreams that he can interpret for others, and it's like, oh, tell me your dreams, I'll interpret them. But then eventually he gets to the point where a dream is given to him, and he says, who can interpret dreams but God alone? It's this journey of him almost putting himself back and saying, no, this is really about God. And you journey with Joseph and you think, I think he's kind of now got it, that this is not about him, but about God and how God is using him to bless others. So if God puts you in a position, as Joseph finds himself in the scriptures, a high up position, then use it to bless others. So returning to the disciples, they just don't really get it. I wonder if they went around saying, hey, I'm one of the 12. But who are you? They're not even that great. I mean, even after the whole child in their midst incident, that third part of the passage that we had read earlier on, we saw someone else, Jesus, driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he's not one of us. I mean, they really don't get it. Not one of us. This sounds like status and belief of greatness that heads in towards elitism. You see, elitism says, this group here, we're great. We're the good people. We're the people who can do it. No, not you over there. We are great, but this guy can't share in our ministry. We are the special ones. We are the ones who are great. He's not one of us. You see, greatness is dangerous because it puts up barriers between whoever you decide and whoever you decide is out. The good news of Jesus is an invitation to all humanity, no matter what social, economic, immigration, or health status, or any other status you carry. Now, we haven't read the whole of chapter 9, but if we had, would have seen at the beginning of chapter 9, just a few verses previously, that Jesus has given them authority and power to drive out demons. Then we have, in verse 40, just literally a few verses before our reading today, the disciples' inadequacy and inability to drive out a demon. And then they see a guy driving out demons and says, no, not this guy. I mean, these disciples are a mess. It's laughable, their arrogance, their ignorance of how much they are blinded by their chosenness and greatness. This other guy is driving out demons in Jesus' name. But not only that, the disciples say, we tried to stop him. And my emphasis is we tried, but clearly we failed at stopping him. Picture the scene. This guy is releasing demons and setting people free in Jesus' name. The self-important great disciples come over and say, excuse me, what's going on here? You cannot do this. You're not one of the chosen ones, the great ones. Please stop. But then they can't stop him, so embarrassed. They go back to Jesus, whining and complaining. This guy over here is driving out demons in your name. Tell him to stop. And Jesus says, don't stop him. Can you picture the next scene where they go back and say, Jesus says it's okay. And the guy's like, I was going to carry on anyway. You see, all Christians, all disciples of Jesus are called to minister and join in with what he has commissioned us to do. Let's not be like those first disciples and say, we just leave that to the special ones. And this is where I want to finish because, I have been slamming the disciples a bit today. Okay, quite a lot today. They really aren't that great. But I hope you see that I'm doing this to image our brokenness and what's going on for them is mirrored in our lives. But you know what's amazing? Jesus used those first disciples in all their brokenness, in their misunderstanding of Jesus, in their just not getting things and understanding things. Jesus used them in their non-greatness, their lack of faith and understanding to change the world. From this group of people, Jesus' name was spread. The good news of Jesus was spread. And this gives me great hope that Jesus can use us today as well, you and me, in our brokenness, in our misunderstanding, in our lack of faith, in our non-greatness, to continue to change the world and spread the good news of Jesus. I'm going to hand over to Elaine to lead us in a time of response.